Yeah, I'm glad to tell this God story. It involved my whole family. Me and Janet, my wife, and our three children, Rachel, Steve, and Jenny. And when this happened, they were ages 4, 6, and 8. And this event happened in 2 parts. It started right here in Manila in the Philippines. And the second part of the story ends up here in Duluth, Minnesota. And this first part started on May 7th of 1973, and my wife and I were living in the Philippines. Our 3 children were all born in the Philippines, and we went out to the airport to come home to the United States for a vacation, a furlough. And so we went out to the Manila airport and checked in out there, and we were after we had our tickets in hand, we were herded into a great big auditorium, big building there with, I don't know, at least 1,000 people in there getting on different airplanes at the international airport. And as we wandered in with our 3 children, we looked around and thought, where are we going to sit in here while we wait for us to be called to get on our plane? And so we wandered in and we're looking around, and then I saw a couch over on the far side of the room, and nobody was sitting in it. And so I said, Jen, let's go sit over there. And so we herded our 3 children and walked across this auditorium, almost as big as a football field, as I recall, this great big room, and towards this couch, and people sitting everywhere. And the couch was here, facing a window, and there was another couch here facing out into where everybody was and where we were walking. And in between was a coffee table. And as we walked over to this couch, I noticed that there was an American couple sitting in the couch facing where we were going to sit. A young couple, turned out they were with the Peace Corps, and he had a master's degree in ecology and was helping people with community development in the Philippines, he and his wife. They had no kids at that time. And so we walked over there. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but I learned this about 1.5 years later, that as we walked over there, the man, everybody else in this room is brown-faced Filipinos, and here we were white people, Americans, and this couple, their names were Joseph and Patricia. And they're white people too, they were Americans, it turned out. And they were waiting to get on a plane, not the plane we were getting on, they were going on a 5-day vacation to Hong Kong just to take he was with the Peace Corps, working with the Peace Corps. And as we walked over there, we learned later that he leaned over to his wife and he said to her, he says, uh-oh, I'll bet they're missionaries. And then he said to her, whatever you do, don't speak to them. And then we came over and plopped ourselves down. Well, my nose was about as far away from his nose as, well, about 6 feet, that's all. And me, I'm an extrovert, so I says, hi, I'm Tom, who are you? You know, and he was polite, and so he had to politely answer my question. Oh, we're with the Peace Corps, and our name is, I'm Joseph, and this is my wife, Patricia, and we're with the Peace Corps. And I says, oh, that's interesting, yeah. I says, well, we're missionaries, which was just what he was fearing. And, but he kept up, he clearly had learned how to be polite. So I said, oh, well, what are you doing? He explained how he was helping people with, some people in the Philippines learn how to do kind of agriculture which would be cost efficient and ecologically efficient. And he didn't know at first, but I majored in ecology in college, so pretty soon I said, oh, well, I'm living in a rainforest, and describing the work we were doing with these people and the destruction of the rainforest. And in spite of himself, he got interested in that. And my 3 children were sitting here, age 3, 6, and 9 at the time, or 4, 6, and 9. And they were just listening intently to all this. And then our flight was called on the loudspeaker. So we got up and I said, it was good to meet you, and they stood up and we shook hands with them. And we went and we got on the on our plane and flew off to Los Angeles. That was May 7th, 1973. And I just kind of forgot about them, didn't think much about them. I mean, I know that God is always with us, but I'm not always cognizant of that. All I'm thinking is how to get out of this hot waiting room onto an air-conditioned airplane where I can cool off. But my 3 children, we got on the plane and they looked at me and Janet and they says, "Daddy, we've got to pray for them. They need to know Jesus." And I said, "Oh, well, what am I going to do?" So we prayed on the plane and off we flew to the States. I didn't think much about it, but my 3 children, especially the older 2, they never got this out of their mind. Every time we're going to pray at the table before we eat, they said, "Be sure you pray, Daddy, pray for Joseph and Patricia. They need to know Jesus." So of course I had to do that. And then before we tuck them in bed at night, we were living with my parents in Los Angeles. They'd remind me to pray for them. And so then after a month in California, we drove in our car to visit Janet's family in Duluth, Minnesota. So while we're living there during the summer, my birthday came. On August 13th, my birthday, Janet's brother took me and Janet out to a restaurant 17,000 miles away from Manila. 3 months later, and we're sitting there eating, and Janet's brother is paying for my steak, so it just came, and I thought, oh man, anything I like, it's a hot steak. And just as she sets the steak down, about that moment, Janet says, "Tom, do you see who that is sitting over? Look out over at that table across this restaurant." The restaurant was big, by the way. I mean, there were 100 people sitting in all these tables around there, and I looked, and there were 3 women at a table over there, and that one, I thought, she looks familiar. And Janet says to me, "Tom, that's the girl we met in the airport." Awesome. And as soon as Janet said that, I said, "Yes." I said, "That's right." And at that moment, I just rose out of my chair like it was God lifting me up by my cuff of the neck and saying, "Well, get over there and do your job." And I said, "Well, what about my steak?" I mean, I didn't really say that to God because you get in trouble for that. But I got up and I just walked over to that woman, and I walked up to these 3 women sitting there, and when I got close to them, she looked at me and she just said, "Oh, the linguist." And then I says, "Well, what are you doing here?" And she said, "Well, what are you doing here?" And he said, "Well, we're here. Janet's family lives here in Duluth." And he says, "Well," I said, "What are you doing here?" She says, "Well," she says, "my husband got tired of working for the Peace Corps, and so did I, so we quit, and he's just gotten a job here at the University of Minnesota teaching ecology." And I says, well, where's he?" She said, "Well, he's at home," and she was out there with 2 of her girlfriends or something. So I got her, I said, "Well, what's your phone number? I'll call you." And Janet wasn't with me. She just stayed at the table with her brother and his wife eating their steak while my steak's getting cold there, God does ask us to do an awful lot of hard tasks, doesn't he? Leave a hot steak to go talk to these people. Anyway, I wrote her phone number down, and I said, "Well, I will call you tomorrow." And I went back, and we ate our steak dinner, and they were finished with their dinner, so we saw them leave and go out. And we got home that evening, and when I told my 3 kids about this, seemed like they know God better than I do. And right away they just said, "We got to pray." And they just said, "Oh, Dad, you got to invite them over. Where do they live?" And I said, "Well, I got their phone number." So the next day I got up. I think my kids woke me up and said, "Are you going to call them now and tell them to come over?" So I called them, and they came over a couple of nights later to our home, and they stayed till 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm not a night person, but I was that night. And we just, when we knew they were going to come, even an old Presbyterian guy like me can tell what the 17,000 miles distance between these 2 places Now, folks, imagine that think of how many restaurants are in the United States. Now, if you had a course in statistics, if there are 10 restaurants in the United States, what would be the statistical chances that Jan and I would go to this restaurant and meet this woman there who we met 3 months earlier in Asia? Well, something like 10 to the 32nd power, which means, more than 1 in 10 million chances. That's if there's 10 restaurants in the USA. But I don't know how many restaurants there are, but there's a lot more than 10. So when they came over to Jan and I said, well, we're going to have to talk to them about Jesus. And so we did, and they just sat there listening to us. And I told them, why don't you do something really radical? Why don't you do this, Joe? Go home and think. Use your mind and think. Could this be true? Is there anything to this? And if there's, why don't you turn your whole life over to Christ? Well, they went home that night, and then we had no more contact with them because we left a week later to go back to California. And we were in California with my family, my parents, for the winter. And then in the following summer of 1974, we went back there and found out that they'd been trying to contact us through our church. So we called them again, and they said, oh, we want to come over and talk to you. We want to come over and talk to you. We've accepted Jesus. So we said, well, come on over. And they came over a night or two later for supper again. They stayed till 2 o'clock in the morning that time, but this time their stories were a lot different. And then we went back to the Philippines later that summer, and didn't have contact with them for a while. But they ended up organizing a Christian mission called Agricultural Services International or something like that. And that mission is still functioning in several countries in the world. And he became the head of that mission. And I don't know, they have maybe 100 missionaries out there that are trained in economic development kind of missions. What did I learn about obedience and the call of God? Well, not too much. My children sure learned a lot. But I don't know. I mean, well, at the time, we recognized that this had to be the hand of God, because it couldn't, you know what Richard Dawkins would say, oh, just a coincidence. Come on, Dr. Dawkins. How many restaurants are in the United States? Now, I just learned that God, through that and other experiences, I learned that God works through me even on bad days, and even when I'm not as cognizant of Him as I should be. I mean, I know He's in this room, I believe that all the time, but I don't always think about it. But the kingdom of God it's not a place, it's Him. And when we go around and help a little old lady get across the street, whether we witness to her or not, we're doing kingdom work.